Yes, it does. So as I was talking with the kids, one of the unique aspects of humanity is that we have this propensity to collect things. And just out of curiosity, how many of you have a collection of one kind of thing or another in your home or somewhere else? Yeah. A lot. Probably 80% of us have our hands raised. So in the scriptures, we also discover that some of the great names of the Old Testament were well known for things that they collected as well. Jacob, for example, was very well known for his collection of livestock. He was a great breeder of goats, and he collected many, many, many goats. And in his culture, those goats were a sign of his wealth and of his prestige. Then we have David, King David, who collected land. David was a conquering king who wanted more and more and more land and kept expanding the kingdom of Israel under his rule. Solomon had a different kind of collection. Solomon collected wives. He had about 3,000 of them, if you can imagine such a thing. Yep. Now, I don't have goats, and I don't have land, and I don't have lots of wives, but I do have a few other collections. In our house, Beth is quite a fond appreciator of Frida Kahlo, and so we have Frida Kahlo all over our house. And it was kind of interesting because she also, the other thing that Beth collects is Sacred Heart images of the burning heart. And so it was kind of interesting when we got together and she discovered that I have a burning heart on my chest as a tattoo. And that was almost like she has been kind of placing these in her house in anticipation of someone who would bring that burning heart to her, which has been a really dear thing for us. But as a kid, I collected all kinds of stuff. I collected coins, I collected rocks. My dad's first job as an attorney was in a geology law firm, and the main partner in the firm had this incredible collection of rocks and minerals that every time I walked in to see my dad, I just stood there gaga and fascinated over the different colors and crystals and things that he had in his case. We collect a lot of different things. And we collect them for different reasons, sometimes just for fun, sometimes because they're a symbol of something important to us. My best friend Fernando collects owls. He's a teacher and a preacher, and he collects owls because they're a symbol of wisdom. And so he has all these different boules all over his house that are for him a reminder of something that is central and important to him, which is to gather wisdom and to share it with other people. But we also sometimes get wrapped up in collecting things out of a desire for a certain prestige or power. We collect big bank accounts, or we collect automobiles, right? It's really funny right now. My mom and dad are in a senior housing place, and almost none of them can drive anymore, right? So the status symbol is not your car. It's the quality of walker that you have. And my dad just got the brand new cherry red nitro walker. And as they walk through the place, I hear them commenting on, "Hey, nice new walker, Jim. That's pretty. You got the new nitro model." This propensity to collect things is deep in us. And yet, Jesus challenges us in the text that we've got before us, reminding us that the really most important thing for us to collect is what can be collected with love. Relationships and memories, as one of our young members was wise to declare to us. As we look at our lives, as we move through that period of expansion where we gather things unto ourselves and often find ourselves buying bigger and bigger homes to put all of the more and more stuff that we gather. Only as you enter the stage that my mom and dad are in to have to get rid of more and more and more of it because you're moving into increasingly reduced spaces that can't carry it all. We remember that the stuff that we get to hold in our hands did not come with us when we got here and will not go with us when we leave. Despite the Pharaoh's convictions that they could take their wealth and their servants with them into the afterlife, we all know that that stuff stayed deep in the pyramids, buried with them. But what we can take with us, and this is something I often reflect upon when I lead funeral services, is that the only thing we take with us from here into eternity are the relationships of love, the people. Those are the ones who we get to be with forever. It is God's love in them and in us and through us for one another that allows us to knit and to build and to strengthen what is the deepest and truest treasure of all. And I want to talk a little bit today about how Jesus articulates that and holds that out to you and to me as an alternate priority for our lives. A priority that is not nearly as highly prized in our materialist society as it was for Jesus. So let's look at this text from the Sermon on the Mount. As Jesus turns from personal piety practices that we looked at over the last weeks, and prayer and almsgiving and fasting, and he turns to a very central and core issue in our human life. How do we handle the temptation to see money and physical treasure as something that is of paramount importance? First, he says, don't store up for yourselves treasures on the earth where moth and rust can destroy, where thieves can break in and steal. True it is, all of the things that we could gather and hold as treasure, whether it's fine art or pieces of silver and gold or fancy statues of great worth, whatever we might collect in physical property is all subject to the risk of being lost. All of it is. And not only physical things, but even the money in our banks is subject to being stolen now without anybody having to do anything except sit at their computer. In fact, one of the members of our church lost $80,000 to such a scheme just within the last month. Rust, moth, and thieves can and will eventually take what we have. And if it doesn't, then we will have to just leave it behind anyway. So what instead can we do? Jesus says, store up instead treasure in heaven. Store up for yourselves treasures in heaven where moth and rust cannot destroy, where thieves cannot break in and steal. For wherever your treasure is, there your heart will be as well. And your heart for the Hebrew culture was not so much your emotions or your affections, although that's also part of it. But for the Hebrew people, the heart was the seat of the will. It was the place from which your decisions were made. And so if our treasure is material things, then what Jesus is saying is our will, our decisions are going to be grounded in that which we value most. And if it is our stuff, then that is what's going to drive the will decisions that we make. Jesus says instead, invest invest in things that cannot be taken away from you. Relationships that are enduring, the love that you cultivate between two people, the love that you have for God, and the relationship that you cultivate with God is an enduring treasure that cannot be taken away by anyone. The memories that we hold are things we carry with us always. Jesus goes on to use a phrase that is a little odd for us because it's not really the way that we describe ourselves typically. He says, the eye is the lamp of the body. And if your eye is good, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eyes are bad, your whole body will be full of darkness. So if the light within you is darkness, how great is that darkness? As I was studying about this text, I learned that to have a good eye was actually a phrase that meant to be a generous person. Because in the ancient world, the eye was not a window that things came in through. The eye was more of a projector through which you projected things onto the world. The eye was the vehicle through which the content of your heart was shared with others, was through your eyes. So to have a good eye was to be a generous person. In fact, if you look in Proverbs chapter 22, there's a very interesting text that speaks very directly to this. It is Proverbs 22:9. A person with a good eye will himself be blessed, for he shares his food with the poor. He shares his food with the poor. To have a good eye is to be someone who looks upon the world with a sense of its abundance and a sense of its fullness and not with a sense of its scarcity. And by contrast, to have a bad eye is to be an envious or greedy or acquisitive person. Someone who has to have things for themselves. Someone who envies things that others have. And in fact, in our Mexican culture, we've got the whole idea of mal de ojo, ¿verdad? So if you look at somebody's kid and you admire that kid, or their curly hair, or their beautiful eyes, and you say something about it, and then you don't touch them, right? It's bad news. Mal de ojo. Because you've put your envious eye on them. You see what I'm saying? It's a very similar concept to the one that Jesus is talking about. So the person who has a bad eye or an evil eye is a person who looks upon the world as a place where other people have what they want. And so they get a reputation, or that phrase is used to have a bad eye. It's used for people who are very stingy, very unwilling to share, very greedy and self-interested in the world. And Jesus says, which one do you want to be? ¿Quieres tener un buen ojo o un mal ojo? Un ojo malo? Do you want to have an eye of generosity that brings generosity into the world? Or do you want to be a person who always is looking at others saying, I wish I had that. Maybe I'll just take it, right? Then he goes on to make the choice even sharper, even clearer for us. He says, you really can only serve one master. Because if you try to serve two, you inevitably will love one and hate the other. You will be devoted to one and you will despise the other. If any of you have ever been in a workplace where you have to answer to two bosses, I know you've got that reality rolling. And one of them wants to go this direction, the other one wants to go that direction, and they're both telling you what to do. And you've got to decide which one you're going to follow. And as soon as you do, you can be sure the other one is not going to be happy with you. Or what if you have two coaches on a sports team, and one of you is telling to swing the bat this way, and the other one's telling you to swing the bat this way? What do? Either way you lose. You pick one, and the other one's going to be upset with you. Or What if you got two love interests? And you're trying to figure out how to ride that rail, or those two rails. It's very hard. Because sooner or later, you will love one and despise the other. And Jesus says, here's the choice, folks. You can't love God and love money. It's really that simple. If you treasure and you don't treasure God and the love that is the heart and soul of all of the universe, then you will soon come to a place where you can't love God. Because you will despise one because you love the other. It's not easy to hear the sharpness of Jesus' contrast here. It's not easy to grab hold of that and allow it to speak its truth sharply to our spirits. A few months ago, a couple of years ago probably, early in our time doing the Philippians project, the pastors were presented in one of our retreats with an exercise that I brought back and used with the session when we were starting to talk about money, especially in anticipation of our capital campaign. And I said, we're going to need to learn how to feel comfortable talking about money. And this exercise was very interesting. It took the 5 candles of the Advent wreath, right? Love, faith, joy, hope, and peace, right? And it took those candles and it said, and it had us reflect in 2 directions. What if you rely upon money in order to get this quality? What if you lived your life relying upon money to bring you joy? Relying upon money to bring you peace? Relying upon money to demonstrate that you were a person of faith? Relying on money to be able to be hopeful? Relying on money to be able to experience love? What would that life look like? And contrast that life with a life where I choose to use my money to express the joy or to bring joy to other people. What if I choose to use my money as an expression of my faith and who I truly believe in? What if I use my money not if I try to secure peace by having more of it, but what if I try to create peace in the world by the way in which I invest and use the resources God's placed in my hands? What if, instead of trying to get those things through something that will never give them, we try instead to use our resources to create in the world these things that God values? Would not those lives look very different? Very different. And that is the choice that Jesus holds out to us. He says, I'm challenging you to take what you have been given and to use it, not to hoard it, but to use it in ways that bring about the things that my Father cares most about. To use it to invest in God's reign, God's rule, God's kingdom, God's work. And not to first and foremost hoard it for ourselves. That message is not one that our culture embraces. But it is a message that lies at the center of Jesus' teaching. It lies at the center of this Sermon on the Mount. So much so that as you hear the text next week that Consuelo will be preaching on, you will hear, why are you anxious about what you will eat, what you will drink, what you will wear? Why do you get all worked up about those things when God, who cares for the birds, loves you too? Friends, our lives can reflect a good eye or an evil eye. An eye that seeks to bring and share generously in the world, or an eye that is always feeling like I don't have enough and I need more of what somebody else has. One of those will bring us joy. The other one will not. Let us pray. Amoroso Dios, por la generosidad que tú derrames sobre nosotros diariamente, te damos gracias. Y pedimos por tu gracia la capacidad de vivir con igual generosidad, para que la fuente de tu amor que nunca se acaba puede fluir en nuestras vidas, ofreciéndose continuamente a los demás. Concédenos la gracia de buscar tesoro celestial, tesoro eterno, tesoro divino, tesoro tuyo, y no el tesoro que el mundo ofrece, que siempre se pudre en nuestras manos. Por Cristo te lo pedimos. Amén. Friends, grateful for all of the abundant grace and love that God has poured out upon us